You do recall, of course, the enormous row over Uganda's stringent anti-gay laws sometime last year, don't you? Well, that in turn has actually forced Uganda's government to relook at its domestic revenue sources, and so far is developing some interesting numbers in that regard. We'll be looking at the revival, or the Lazarus effects rather, if you will, on Uganda's tax revenues in this edition of Global Business, but that's not the only thing on the agenda. Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan, they've signed a deal on how to use the waters from the Nile. And farmers in Somalia are rediscovering beekeeping as an alternative source of income. Let's start in East Africa, Uganda. To be specific, the tax body over there has actually delivered a surplus in its revenue collections for the last 8 months. Now, that excess is being attributed mainly to improved efficiency in revenue administration, as well as initiatives that are increasing the number of taxpayers in the country. Here's Michael Baleke with that report.
Uganda has registered an 18% growth in net revenue collections. Much of this has come from domestic taxes. They have seen a $7 million surplus over the last 8 months. The country's tax body says new areas of revenue collection, mostly from the informal sector, are responsible for the progress.
Rental income is an area of growth, and it's an area where outreach as well as collaboration with other entities that somehow work with the housing sector will enable us to make inroads.
In response to Uganda's anti-homosexuality legislation, many countries cut financial support to the aid-dependent nation. This has forced the country to close all loopholes that in the past have allowed people to avoid tax. And studies are being carried out into sectors like that of agriculture.
There is the feeling that agricultural income is supposed to be exempted. So even people who are engaged in profitable farming do not think that they are supposed to pay taxes.
More than 50% of Uganda's population relies on agriculture for their livelihood. Although regarded as a potential revenue area, experts in the sector say the proposed move by the tax body is not reasonable.
Our agriculture sector has been so much abandoned. Actually, when we think of even taxing it, we are wishful thinkers, because you cannot think of taxing where you have not invested.
The agricultural sector contributes significantly to the GDP base, but the Revenue Authority says its contribution to tax is not proportionate. As research on how to get revenues from agriculture takes shape, taxing idle land would be another area of interest to the taxman. But for now, focus will be directed to strengthening areas that have previously brought major revenues into the country. And South Sudan is a target.
The trade has picked up. If you compare what it was last year in December and now, the trend has increased. And our border with South Sudan, the border in Elegu, is increasingly becoming one of our largest.
However, the current fluctuations in the dollar could possibly affect revenue collections. Michael Baleke, CCTV, Kampala.
We're still in East Africa, where Kenya's largest sugar producer, Mumia Sugar, reported first-half losses of over $20 million, mainly due to lower prices and reduced output during a prolonged shutdown. The cash-strapped company, whose sugar output accounts for roughly a third or so of Kenya's annual sugar production, will get a government bailout of quite a bit of money, about $15 million or so. But that deal comes with a set of conditions. It has to fire 300 or so staff members, and that includes half of the board of directors and most of top management, if not all of them. Last year, Mumia's lenders, among them Ecobank, the Kenya Commercial Bank, CFC Stanbic and Barclays, all appointed KPMG to review the firm before a request to restructure its debts. The forensic audit was carried out at the request of the board. It revealed enormous levels of theft and breaches of governance by previous sets of managers. It also revealed how employees exploited and profited from loopholes within the miller's governance structure. Let's look at Mumia Sugar in a lot more detail, and of course the plan to bail it out by government. Johnson Derry is in charge of corporate advisory services at ABC Capital. He joins me live in studio right now. Johnson, let's start with your broad recommendation, your personal recommendation on Mumia Sugar shares, hold, buy or sell?
Well, it's a sensitive question, but I'll be brief. For me, it's a sell for now.
Right. Even if the four main problems in the sugar industry as a whole, capacity utilization, irregular factory maintenance, poor transport infrastructure, weak corporate governance, assuming all of those can be sorted out, is sugar manufacturing really a viable business, given the fact that COMESA safeguards, after all, cannot last forever?
That's the thing. The business faces that risk. Obviously, it's ill-equipped to compete. There are other aspects of it as well. For example, how do they manage the corruption that we saw earlier on, and the other issue about the numbers that were, that we thought were the appropriate numbers. Apparently, it turns out that it was, even in terms of revenues, it was not making as much, and some of the revenues they were reporting as theirs actually belonged to Mumia's outgrowers company. So the question is how profitable it is, and for me, where I sit right now, I really can't see a business case.
Aside from the fact that the government cannot unilaterally guarantee that it can shield Mumia Sugar from cheaper foreign imports, which in any case is amounting to double taxation on Kenyan consumers, what are the threats do you think will imperil the success of this restructuring plan that KPMG has to oversee?
For me, I look at Mumias right now as a startup, really, because you see there's a new management coming in. They might need new equipment because maybe the current equipment is obsolete, probably not as efficient in production as it ought to be, where at the level of where its competition is. There are other aspects as well. For example, the new management must be reoriented to the business, and they're quite Mumias is not the only sugar company that has collapsed. I mean, the Western Sugar Belt, I think I don't know if any is doing well. And those that are doing well are probably doing well simply because of COMESA sugar. So there's management risk, there's interest rate risk, there's, I think, too many risks for me. And for me, I ask the question, are we not throwing good money after bad?
Of course, in that context, you're also referring tangentially to things like pan paper mills over in Webuye, which essentially had the exact same situation. Poor management, a lot of market risk, government threw money after it in a bailout, but to date, it's still essentially a zombie company. It's walking dead.
Exactly, and the question is, why did we privatize? One of the reasons why governments privatize is because it can keep taxpayer money out of business and out of risk. So failure is pretty much is part and parcel of capitalism. So if you can't keep throwing money at something that is not working, you've got to draw a line somewhere. The sugar debts today, I think they're in excess of 35 billion. I'm not sure, probably more. That should have given, people a hint. I don't think it's working. I think taxpayers' money is better utilized elsewhere.
Just to clarify, though, when you've got government as a shareholder in a company like Mumia Sugar, where do you draw the line between a shareholder injecting capital to essentially restructure a company versus a shareholder, in this case being government, saying, no, we're not going to employ taxpayers' money in something that, strictly speaking, we probably shouldn't even be touching anyway?
That's what we're saying. They probably should have got out when they were ahead. There was a time Mumias was trading at good prices. We can see the same thing in the other government parastatals. The National Bank consolidated. Under Kibaki, they seem like they were reviving, but now they look like they're faltering again. So the question is, because we've seen this globally, it's not just a phenomenon that is unique to Kenya, where government is involved. It becomes tricky if the companies are not doing well. We've got a lot of parastatals that are cash hungry. We don't think there's a business case, and even where there is, because of political interference and other issues, it becomes difficult to manage them as the same way private sector companies, which have to swim or die on the basis of the strength of their business and management, the same pressures they face. And you know what? Even in private sector, there are failures. Yeah. The question is, what happens when private sector businesses fail? Creditors come in and take over the business and give it to people who probably would be able to run those things better. But in this case, I mean, because government is part and parcel of the failure, they're not letting it, go the natural way. They keep pumping money into it, and in my opinion, actually probably wasting taxpayer money. And by the time they actually concede that maybe it's not working, too much of taxpayers' money has gone down the drain. And remember, this taxpayers' money is, I mean, a lot of the taxpayers here are not necessarily very rich, and therefore I think it is unfair to, some people have had to forgo milk. Remember when the VAT 16% rate was slapped on almost all commodities, and then that money is being used is being thrown down this financial black hole. I think it's unfair.
Indeed. We'll have to leave it there for the time being. Thank you for your insights. That's Johnson Derry's in charge of corporate advisory services at ABC Capital. Mumia Sugar, of course, has been yo-yoing quite a bit in the last couple of months, up about 30% or so by last week Friday. Quick run to the markets for you here. Some positive numbers coming through in Egypt and in Nigeria. Both indices up by at least 20 or so basis points. The Kenyan market, of course, in a bit of a correction earlier today. Incidentally, with regard to that case about capital gains tax being levied on equities, the Kenya Association of Stockbrokers and Investment Bankers lost the first round of that case. They are, however, going to appeal against it. We'll be in Nigeria next. The economy is taking another hit from falling oil prices. Its credit rating has been cut. Egypt, Ethiopia, Sudan, they've signed a deal over how to use the waters from the Nile, but what exactly does it mean for all these three countries? We'll answer that question shortly. Africa is on the move. It's home to 7 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies. We help you make sense of the fast-changing African business landscape. We take you where the business is happening.
Global Business, weekdays at this time on CCTV Africa.
Effects of the austerity measures are evident and were expected. Egyptians, however, seem to be patient about it. But El-Sisi told government he wants to control the prices promptly before people's patience runs out.
We're continuing our journey across the African business landscape. This is Global Business Africa. Thank you for watching. Now, a rally that made Nigerian bonds the best performers in Africa in March risks coming to an end as the credit rating of the continent's largest economy has been cut. S&P lowered its assessment on Nigeria one level to B+. It also changed its outlook from stable from negative. Nigeria's economy is sputtering under the weight of a more than 50% plunge since June in the price of oil, which is its main export and source of government revenue. It's also being affected by an insurgency which has been long-running, run by militants up north, Boko Haram in particular, for elections on the 28th of March. Now, while the central bank has, of course, stemmed a slide in the naira with 17 foreign exchange restrictions since September, Nigeria's currency is still 18% lower against the dollar in the last 6 months. The IMF cut its 2015 growth forecast for Nigeria down to 4.8% on the 5th of March from 6.3% last year. The Central Bank of Nigeria has also drained its foreign exchange reserves by 13% so far in 2015 alone to $30.1 billion, all in the name of defending the naira. Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan, they've been in the headlines today. They all signed a water agreement for the protection of the Nile and the operation of the Grand Renaissance Dam. Now this, on paper at least, could go a very long way in solving all the points of dispute raised by Egypt ever since Ethiopia started constructing what will be the largest dam in Africa. As Yasser Hakim reports, in spite of their differences, business between those two countries has been growing.
Trade is only $200 million. This is not logical. We met in Addis Ababa a few months ago and set a target to increase trade by $500 million in the next year.
Indeed, there have been increased activity to bring both economies closer together in the last few months.
We have established a joint business council which is mandated to promote and diversify and strengthen the trade and economic relation of the two countries. And we have brought from Ethiopia a business delegation of 40 companies, and also there is a government delegation led by the Minister of Industry.
Ethiopian exports to Egypt are mainly livestock, spices and oil, while it plans to send flowers and agricultural products too. Egypt mainly exports industrial products to Ethiopia. Officials are trying to reduce tariffs and ease regulations to increase trade. Ethiopia also participated at the Cairo International Trade Fair this week. Meanwhile, there have been extensive meetings and a series of visits from officials on both sides.
A large delegation of Ethiopian public diplomacy delegation has visited Ethiopia recently. The Ethiopian Patriarch of the Orthodox Church has led a delegation of the church's clergy into Egypt, and there has been an interaction between the two sisterly churches. Our interest in enhancing trade and business relationship and investment with Egypt is as a result of our conviction that the historic relationship has to be backed with economic benefits that go into the people.
Egyptian investments in Ethiopia has been on the rise as well.
We have in the pipeline some projects in the lamps. We have a major investments supposed to be in the Egyptian industrial zone that will attract many other industries, food industries, chemicals, building materials and many others.
Egyptian investments currently stand at $35 billion. The expected Egyptian industrial zone would also increase these investments significantly. There has been a standoff between Egypt and Ethiopia over the Renaissance Dam, but this had not stopped growth in trade activities. And this goodwill, it is hoped, could contribute to a lasting solution between both countries. Yasser Hakim for CCTV, Cairo.
And Yasser Hakim joins us now from the Egyptian capital as well for a deeper examination of what this declaration of principles signed between the three countries does actually mean. Yasser, walk us through the details here. What exactly is this declaration of principles all about?
Well, actually, there's not much details about it. It's just a framework saying that both sides, or the three countries, will work together on a mechanism to solve their problems or disputes concerning the dam, that they would respect the results of the firm, the consultancy firm that is doing studies on the effects of the dam on Egypt and Sudan, as well as giving priority to the downstream countries in using electricity that will be generated from the dam, and also to ensure that they are not affected, the water flow is not affected, is not affecting Egypt, or not be reduced to Egypt once the dam is built. So it's a framework, and we know that, and that's what the Egyptian president said in his speech, that there will be another deal signed which will be more detailed based on this framework.
Egypt and Ethiopia, these two countries, of course, have been at loggerheads for quite a while over this dam. Quite a few angry words flying in both directions. What did it take to get these countries on this table to agree to this deal?
I guess they just noticed or realized that this can go on for a long time, and having a standoff could actually lead to even worse results and repercussions. And also that was said in a speech when the Egyptian president said that this issue could go on for years, and we either had a choice, either to go on and escalate on one side or to cooperate and work together. And they decided that cooperation and building trust is the road ahead, is the best road ahead, rather than conflict. It's just mainly the last few months has seen a loss of trust between the sides. Egypt fears that the dam by Ethiopia is meant to harm the Egyptian life, because water is life for Egypt, and the Nile water is 85% of Egypt's consumption. 95% of Egypt's consumption of water comes from the Nile. And there had to be a building of trust between sides. And this framework is merely to say that we agree on working together to make sure that the dam is built so that it be beneficial for Ethiopia, but at the same time without harming Egypt and Sudan.
Indeed. Let's focus on something that Egypt's irrigation minister said. He said that any future agreement would essentially oblige Ethiopia to change the dam's design if the consultant's report proves that the dam could harm water flow to downstream countries. Now, the GERD is already 40% complete. Isn't it a bit little too late to be demanding design changes at this point?
This is exactly the point that the ones here who are criticizing the whole deal, they're saying, what is the guarantee that after 15 months when this consultancy firm comes up with a report saying that the dam needs to be rebuilt or needs amendments or changes in the dam, what's the guarantee that Ethiopia will go ahead with this? And this is the main condition there. There is no guarantee written. What's written is a respect, the word respect. Egypt wanted an obligation, the word obliged, but this is not written in the deal. It's respect. So what we're saying, we're going back again to what the president is saying, is that trust. Now, will this be the case once the report is out? Will Ethiopia adhere to the report's results? Will it change the dam once it's built? Will it do any changes to it? And this is the question, and this is the main criticism to the deal from Egyptians here who are against the whole framework deal, saying that there is nothing to guarantee anything or oblige Ethiopia to make any changes once a report comes up saying that this dam could harm Egypt.
Indeed, we'll have to leave it there for the time being. That's Yasser Hakim live in Cairo. He'll be keeping tabs on developments from that side. Just to give you an update on this particular story, President El-Sisi is supposed to be addressing the Egyptian parliament tomorrow, asking for formal recognition of Egypt's right to access water from the Nile. The politics over that particular water body does continue. Right, communities living in rural areas in developing countries are often very dependent on firewood and charcoal for cooking and other basic energy domestic needs. Now, this high reliance on wood, of course, has a negative impact on the local environment. In Togo, for example, the rate of deforestation is 5.5% a year. It's for that reason that Togolese researchers have started work on developing a biogas production device in a bid to diversify households' energy supply and save the environment.
This site, set up at the center of Togo's capital, Lomé, domestic waste is being recycled. Thanks to years of research, the Faculty of Science at Lomé University has developed a new energy source in a bid to end the use of charcoal and save the country's forest cover.
Togo, a small country in West Africa, has 6 million inhabitants. And among these 6 million, only 5% use butane gas. The rest, between 4 and 5 million and a half Togolese, have wood as a source of energy.
4 millions, voire même 5 millions et demi de Togolais ont comme source d'énergie le bois.
These researchers have established a pilot plant that will produce biogas from biodegradable waste. They are targeting to supply low-income households.
In the past, we used to buy butane gas, which is very expensive. But since the installation of the device, we use methane. It's faster for cooking, and we only need to replenish it with waste in case of disruption.
The process of developing this new energy source has been simplified.
Le biogaz dont nous parlons n'est pas seulement du méthane, mais
the biogas we're talking about is not only methane, but there's also carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and also ammonia. So in the device, we have installed a filter that blocks all these gases with lime, charcoal, and iron fillings and leaves only the methane. And it's this methane that is directly connected to the kitchen.
le méthane. Et c'est ce méthane qui est directement connecté dans la cuisine.
Apart from providing a source of energy, the project has also created employment. Currently, the plant employs more than a dozen workers.
We sort the waste and collect it in piles up to 7 days. Then we transform this waste for 2 weeks. After 3 months, we start the maturing process as we are doing now, and the resulting product is used as fertilizer in the fields.
Waste from the biogas plant is also collected and later used for plastering buildings or making new bottles. Nomakugu, CCTV.
Now, for a few individuals, bee farming is a family tradition. It's passed down through the generations. For many others, however, a curious interest in beekeeping gradually develops into something a lot more large scale, a lot more commercial. Now, that's often the case for farmers in Somalia's district of Afgoye. For tonight's edition of Grassroots, Mohammed Hirmoga travelled 30 kilometres south of Mogadishu to meet some of these enterprising beekeepers.
Somali farmers say if you want to drizzle amber honey on your morning toast or into your black tea, you might want to try beekeeping. And they also say it's pretty simple. Just place handmade beehives on some specific trees. In these hives, bees are allowed to construct natural combs, determine their own cell sizes and make honey.
The hive is made from a specific tree. There are some trees which the bees like. So the key thing is finding the best hive and the proper tree to place it on. We created a good environment for these bees, the flowers, the river nearby, and a proper hive. So this will be reliable.
Beekeeping doesn't require huge amounts of money, time or space. And it can be done just any place where flowers bloom. Abdikarim, a beekeeper, says honey is harvested every 3 months.
We harvest every 3 months. There are rules to harvesting honey. You must leave some of the honey for the bees to feed on.
It's time. He's nurtured his honeybees to maturity. It's now harvest time. And that hive is a buzz. But harvesting honey is the sticky, messy part. Besides that, this beekeeper doesn't even have harvesting costumes and gear. He has only an improvised face mask.
The secret to harvesting is timing. There are days when it gets impossible to harvest. The person harvesting should act harmless. Lots of movement would anger the bees.
Ahmed has done bee farming for 6 years, and the venture has now attracted competition. Many others are now trying beekeeping. If the honeybee stocks are well managed, bee farming could someday become a profitable business venture. Mohammed Hirmoga, CCTV, Afgoye.
And on that sweet and scary for some of us note, that's it for this edition of Global Business. We'd like to hear feedback on what we do around here. globalbusinessafrica@cctv.com is the email to use. Facebook and Twitter, of course, are also our ports of call when we're not on air. That's it for tonight's program. Thank you for watching. I'm Ramanyan.